when are we gonna let go of January 6th? We gonna let that go because I mean, the man was impeached twice, convicted on 34 felony counts, and still reelected. I mean, at some point in time, somebody like Senator Durbin and others who was asking Pam Bondi about, are you willing to admit he lost the election? It's like, enough of that, because the American people clearly have spoken. At least 77 plus million of them have spoken. He won the electoral college vote, he won the popular vote, he won the swing states, etc. They've said what they've had to say.
Sports personality and increasingly political commentator Stephen A. Smith kind of went to war with House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries over the many failures of the Democratic Party. And as you just heard, one of Stephen A. Smith's concerns is that Democrats rely too much on the same tired messaging about January 6th and how democracy is on the line. Now, you might agree with that messaging. You might actually think that those are genuine issues we should be concerned about. Okay, but you also have to acknowledge that it doesn't really resonate with voters. It didn't work in the election cycle. It's not gonna work if Democrats plan to just lean on that messaging more and more in the coming months and years. And so let's see how Hakeem Jeffries responded to Stephen A. Smith's question.
Well, I think in terms of January 6th, look, it's not something that the American people should ever forget.
Okay.
Because it was an extraordinary event. I was there when we were debating, as Congress does, the certification of the election. And we were told that a mob has breached the Capitol. They're on the second floor. They're a few steps outside of the House chamber, and hit the ground, and be prepared to secure the gas masks that are underneath your seats, because there were people who were trying to stop the peaceful transfer of power.
Okay.
And this is the greatest democracy in the history of the world, so we can't forget January 6th. I'm not suggesting that it's a core issue moving forward in terms of how we are making our case to the American people, but we also can't ignore the fact that in one of his first acts, President Trump chose to pardon violent felons who brutally assaulted and beat police officers. But you are correct that the core issues that we have to connect with the American people on relate to making their life better.
How do you propose to make people's lives better, Hakeem Jeffries? That is the messaging that the Democrats have failed on badly, okay? Like, it's not that, God, it's so hard to even listen to him speak. They need a better House Speaker. I mean, the House Speaker should be a compelling speaker, but Hakeem Jeffries does not fall under that category. But aside from his presentation, what he's saying is also worrisome, because he wants to, again, lean on the same messaging that's not resonating with voters. Voters are frustrated by the cost of living, the fact that they can't afford housing, the fact that grocery prices continue to increase. They want relief. What are Democrats going to do? How are Democrats different from Republicans when it comes to those bread and butter issues? I mean, at this point, it's hard to know, because Democrats don't really talk about those things. They don't focus on those things. But anyway, Smith also confronted Jeffries about the Democrats' abysmal poll numbers. In response, Jeffries insisted that Americans will realize that they dislike Republicans more. So just sit back, let the Republicans devastate them, and then they'll come flocking back, I guess. He also argued that Democrats are currently facing a messaging problem. You think? Let's watch.
Well, there was a Washington Post poll that just came out earlier today, and it asked the American people, who would you prefer is in charge in the next Congress? House Democrats to serve as a check and balance on Donald Trump, or House Republicans who are going to continue to just go along to get along? And by 13 points, the American people said House Democrats. I think it was 54 to 41.
Mm-hmm.
We clearly have work to do, but I also think that the American people are increasingly starting to recognize that in this country that we have, you need common sense public servants who are willing to try to solve problems to make life better for hard-working American families. And that's our commitment. And we're going to have to do a better job of convincing the American people that is what drives us to make life better for every American in every single community in every corner of the country.
How? Get specific. You guys need to get specific. Okay, like vague statements about how you're looking out for working class people is not gonna work. Get specific. But I mean, that would require them to be genuine in wanting to improve the economic situation for working class Americans in this country. That would require them to actually fight for those types of policies once they're in a position of power again. And every time we find them in a position of power, every time the voters do the work and get them elected, every time we have a Democratic president and control of both the House and the Senate, all of a sudden we get all the different excuses for why Democrats just can't make it happen. And while Hakeem Jeffries is stuttering and having a difficult time messaging in a freaking interview, he didn't seem to have a problem, raising money from a lobbying firm that does work on behalf of Elon Musk's companies and Peter Thiel's companies. Is that where all his energy is going right now? More fundraising? Because the money ain't gonna save the Democrats if they've got nothing to sell the American people. Now, the problem is the party can't message anything if the party doesn't actually intend to do anything. That's the issue here. Now, right now, Jeffries is doing plenty for his donors. Yesterday, again, we told you about how he's raising money from that lobbying firm, but there's more. Earlier this month, Politico broke this story. Hakeem Jeffries met privately with Silicon Valley donors and bid to mend fences. And we report on that story too, of course, because unlike pretty much everyone else in the media, we actually want to inform you guys about what's happening with both sides of the political aisle. Because quite frankly, the American people right now are getting screwed, and I'm real sick of the tribal politics that makes it appear as though one party is better than the other in screwing them less. So let's talk about James Carville, because we've been giving him a lot of credit for speaking out against how terrible the Democratic Party has been in recent elections, how they don't really have leadership, how they don't really have a plan, how they keep pushing super unpopular, social policies that people consistently say they don't want. Well, now I'm gonna take a little bit of that credit away because he penned an op-ed in the New York Times that absolutely made me sick. And I wanna read a few excerpts for you. Now, Carville knows that Americans are in for a lot of pain if Republicans accomplish what we're suspecting they wanna do in cutting, food stamps, Medicaid. Like if they do that, it's gonna cause so much harm to people's lives. Carville acknowledges that. Here's what he says. President Trump is hell-bent on dismantling the federal government, which will result in one clear thing: disorder. There will probably be more enormous tax cuts for the wealthy and Medicaid cuts hitting a lot of other people, but there is nothing the American public despises more than disorder and a broken economy. But he basically advises Democrats to respond to this by letting it happen, by letting Americans really suffer and feel the pain so voters come flocking back to them, to the Democrats. There's nothing Democrats can legitimately do to stop it, even if we wanted to. Well, do they want to, Carville? I'm curious. He continues, with no clear leader to voice our opposition, ouch to Hakeem Jeffries, and no control in any branch of government, it's time for Democrats to embark on the most daring political maneuver in the history of our party. Roll over and play dead, do nothing, do nothing, do nothing. Okay. All right, well, maybe he saves the argument. Let's see, what else is he arguing here? Allow the Republicans to crumble beneath their own weight and make the American people miss us. Only until the Trump administration has spiraled into the low 40s or high 30s in public approval polling percentages should we make like a pack of hyenas and go for the jugular. Until then, I'm calling for a specific political retreat. Okay, and then what happens? And then what happens? So play dead, don't fight them on anything. Let them, give them enough rope to hang themselves with. I get the argument. I mean, it's gonna cause a lot of damage to the lives of working class Americans, but what happens then? just when they've pushed themselves to the brink and it appears they could collapse the global economy, come in and save the day. All right, be the competent party, he argues. Save the day, be the competent party. You won't win or achieve anything meaningful going toe to toe with the Trump administration right now. Who are the competent members of the Democratic Party? Can you explain that to me, Carville? And for all the people watching the show who identify as Democrats, I get that it's hard to hear that. I have no ill will towards voters at all. In fact, my heart breaks for Democratic voters. I used to be a Democratic voter. I'm an independent now because I'm sick of how incompetent the Democratic Party really is. And honestly, calling them incompetent really is generous. Because in reality, they're not incompetent necessarily, they're just corrupt. So they'd be happy to sit back and watch Medicaid get dismantled or other government programs get dismantled while pretending like they don't like it. Because they're funded by the same scum donors that fund Republicans, which is why every time Republicans accomplish something in their agenda, like the 2017 tax cuts, Trump's 2017 tax cuts. Remember when Biden claimed that he was gonna reverse the cuts in corporate taxes? Trump cut the taxes from 35% to 21%. Biden comes in, he doesn't say, let's take the corporate taxes back up to 35%. His starting bid was 28%. And in the end, he didn't even fight for that because they love the tax cuts. The Democrats' donors love the tax cuts. So the idea that Democrats can sit back and do nothing, watch Republicans potentially cut incredibly critical programs like Medicaid, and then when Americans are really suffering from those cuts, Democrats are gonna swoop in and what, reverse the damage that Republicans did in cutting Medicaid funding? Does anyone really buy for a second that they're gonna do that? Because I don't. They have a proven track record of failing the American people. And that's why I'm so angry about what's happening in this country right now. Yeah, we can point to all the damage that's being done by Elon Musk, by Doge. We can talk about all the veterans who have been fired indiscriminately from the federal government. We can talk about the fact that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which of course was the only cop on the beat, hyper-focused on big banks, has been dismantled. But I mean, who's the opposition? Where's the opposition party? Democrats thought they could lie to their base, engage in a cover-up, anoint Kamala Harris as the replacement to Joe Biden, and everyone was just gonna suck it up and support them anyway. Okay, Biden promised a public option in our healthcare system, didn't even mention it once he got elected. Democrats think they can keep failing the American people again and again and again, and everyone is just going to tuck tail and support them after experiencing the suffering that's been brought upon them by the Republican Party. But that didn't work in the last election cycle. They have to actually run on something. They have to communicate to the American people what they intend to do, how they intend to do it, and then they need to accomplish it. And if they're not gonna be willing to do that, they're gonna keep losing. James Carville has made some good points in recent weeks and months. I will give him that. But unfortunately, he's suffering from the same brain rot a lot of people in his age group are suffering from. And it's the idea that the Democratic Party of today is the same Democratic Party from literally decades ago. It's not. Okay, the money has flowed into their campaign coffers. They are paid to be useless. They are paid to be weak in the face of the Republican Party. And unless we do something to root out that corruption and get Democrats to understand the money ain't even saving you anymore, they're gonna keep losing. And the idea that Americans should suffer in the meantime is pathetic. Now, if you want an example of a Democrat who's actually doing something useful, Bernie Sanders, who's actually older than Joe Biden, is currently traveling the country, going to Republican strongholds, hosting events that are so crowded that there's like a crowd waiting outside hoping to get in. And he's simply talking about his vision for this country and how Americans can organize and fight back to make that vision come to fruition. He's empowering the people. In the meantime, losers like Hakeem Jeffries are going back to their greatest hits. One trick pony, January 6th, threat to democracy. Yeah. It didn't work, but he's gonna go for it again. Loser.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.